Peace and power, and welcome back. I am Nina, Katie's granddaughter, and you are on the platform Katie's Alchemy. So today we're getting back into the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. We are on chapter 12 in part 3, and principle number 11 was dramatize your ideas. Chapter 12 is when nothing else works, try this. Charles Schwab had a mill manager whose people weren't producing their quota of work. How is it, Schwab asked him, that a manager as capable as you can't make this mill turn out what it should? I don't know, the manager replied. I've coaxed them in, I've pushed them, I've sworn and cussed, I've threatened them with damnation and being fired, but nothing works. They just won't produce. This conversation took place at the end of the day, just before the night shift came on. Schwab asked the manager for a piece of chalk, then turning to the nearest man, asked, How many heats did your shift make today? 6. Without another word, Schwab chalked a big figure 6 on the floor and walked away. When the night shift came in, they saw the 6 and asked what it meant. The big boss was in here today, the day people said. He asked how many heats we made, and we told him 6. He chalked it down on the floor. The next morning, Schwab walked through the mill again, and the night shift had rubbed out 6 and replaced it with a big 7. When the day shift reported for work the next morning, they saw a big 7 chalked on the floor. So the night shift thought they were better than the day shift. Did they? Well, they would show the night shift a thing or two. The crew pitched in with enthusiasm, and when they quit that night, they had left behind them an enormous swaggering 10. Things were stepping up. Shortly, this mill, which had been lagging way behind in production, was turning out more work than any other mill on the plant. In the plant, the principal, let Charles Schwab say it in his own words. The way to get things done, says Schwab, is to stimulate competition. I do not mean in a sordid money-getting way, but in the desire to excel. The desire to excel, the challenge, throwing down the gauntlet, an infallible way of appealing to the people of spirit. Without a challenge, Theodore Roosevelt would have never been president of the United States. The Rough Rider, just back from Cuba, was picked for governor of New York State. The opposition discovered that he was no longer a legal resident of the state, and Roosevelt, frightened, wished to withdraw. Then Thomas Collier Platt, then U.S. Senator from New York, threw down the challenge. Turning suddenly on Theodore Roosevelt, he cried in a ringing voice, Is the hero of San Juan Hill a coward? Roosevelt stayed in the fight, and the rest is history. A challenge not only changed his life, it had a real effect on the future upon the nation. All men have fears, but the brave put down their fears and go forward, sometimes to death, but always to victory, was the motto of the King's Guard in ancient Greece. What greater challenge can be offered than the opportunity to overcome those fears? When Al Smith was governor of New York, he was up against it. Sing Sing at the time was the most notorious penitentiary west of Devil's Island, and it was without a warden. Scandals had been sweeping through the prison walls, scandals and ugly rumors. Smith needed a strong man to rule Sing Sing, an Iron Man. But who? He sent for Louis E. Laws of New Hampton. How about going up to take charge of Sing Sing, he said jovially when Laws stood before him. They need a man up there with experience. Laws was flabbergasted. He knew the dangers of Sing Sing. It was a political appointment subject to the vagaries of political whims. Wardens had come and gone. One had lasted only 3 weeks. He had a career to consider. Was it worth the risk? Then Smith, who saw his hesitation, leaned back in his chair, and smiled. "Young fellow," he said, "I don't blame you for being scared. It's a tough spot. It'll take a big person to go up there and stay." So Smith was throwing down a challenge, was he? Laws like the idea of attempting a job that called for someone big. So he went. And he stayed. He stayed to become the most famous warden of his time. His book, 20,000 Years in Sing Sing, sold into the hundreds of thousands of copies. His broadcasts on the air and his stories of prison life have inspired dozens of movies. His humanizing of criminals wrought miracles in the way of prison reform. "I have never found," says Harvey S Firestone of the Great Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, "that pay alone would either bring together a whole good people. I think it was the game itself." Frederick Hertzberg of the great behavioral scientists concurred. He studied in depth the work attitudes of thousands of people ranging from factory workers to senior executives. What do you think he found to be the most motivating factor? The one facet of jobs that was most stimulating. Money, good working conditions, fringe benefits? No, not any of those. The one major factor that motivated people was the work itself. If the work was exciting and interesting, the worker looked forward to doing it and was motivated to do a good job. That is what every successful person loves: the game, the chance for self expression, the chance to prove his or her worth, to excel, to win. That is what makes foot traces and hog calling and pie eating contests: the desire to excel, the desire for a feeling of importance. So, principle number 12 is throw down a challenge. In a nutshell, for part, I think this was part 2, part 3. Let me see. Yeah, this was part 3. So, in a nutshell, for part 3, win people, how to win people to your way of thinking. So, in a nutshell, win people to your way of thinking. Principle number 1, the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Principle number 2, show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say you're wrong. Principle number 3, if you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Principle number 4, begin in a friendly way. Principle number 5, get the other person saying yes, yes immediately. And principle number 6, let the other person do a great deal of talking. Principle number 7, let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. Principle number 8, try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Principle number 9, be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Principle number 10, appeal to nobler motives. Principle number 11, dramatize your ideas. And last but not least, in part 3, principle number 12, throw down a challenge. Peace and power, and I'm out of here.